Hello everyone, on all channels, wherever you may be. This is Simon Jacobson broadcasting from Midtown Manhattan. Not that it makes a difference, but here we are. And we're going to talk about why do we procrastinate. The procrastinators have not yet arrived, so they'll be able to watch the archive version. How's that? So when you ask someone, are you a procrastinator, as the joke goes, if it's a procrastinator, he'll answer, by when do you need to know? I remember hearing an advertisement on the radio, which every time I remind myself, I still laugh. And the advertisement went like this. I'll tell you who the advertisement was at the end. There's a guy. Looks like it's, you hear it on the radio, so it's like a 12-step program. And the guy says, I've stopped procrastinating now for 1 year, 3 months, 6 days, and 2 hours. And everyone says, yes, welcome, William, whatever his name was. And he says, let me tell you why I finally stopped procrastinating. When I hit rock bottom, I heard this ad for Norwegian cruises. And they said that if you sign up by December 1st, you get a 40% discount by December 1st by midnight. And I called at 12:05. And that was it. So something happened there. 1 second. There was a technological glitch. Talk about procrastinating. I think a procrastinator may have sabotaged this. I didn't say anything offensive, did I? Okay. That was a joke. It's not, I don't think it's, let me just, give me a moment. This never happens. Mm-hmm. So why do we procrastinate? I was in the middle of telling the Norwegian cruises, that's when he hit rock bottom. He called 12:05 instead of 12 o'clock. And that was the ad, but I never forgot it. And, procrastination is an interesting phenomenon. The question is, do we all procrastinate? Do we not? Definitely people see it as some type of almost chronic thing where things that are important to get done, deadlines and so on, just can't get done, or find every type of distraction to stop yourself from doing something important. Some even argue it can have even some serious consequences, delaying, let's say, medical treatment or medical evaluation, or failing at school, or other things that have different consequences. So I want to talk about this topic from a somewhat of a mystical, Kabbalistic perspective. I know that's interesting. How do you mix mysticism with procrastination? But as you'll soon see, there is a connection. And obviously, when you look up the topic, you'll see that many people don't really have an understanding. There some see it as a type of personality thing, that some people just have that personality. Some see it as a fear, connected to things like fear of commitment or fear of failure or other stuff. And some people actually see it as something connected to people's identity and sense of identity and sense of time. So however you twist it, there's many different approaches to it, and it's hard to really, nobody's really diagnosed it in a proper way. Is it even a diagnosis? I should add into the equation, I'll add one more important question. Is procrastination as bad as the rapid gets? Is there no value to it? Does it have any redeeming factor? For example, when you say deliberating on something, I need to deliberate on it. Is that a form of procrastination, or is that a healthy form of due diligence, of doing your research before you make a decision? And do they overlap? So all this is part of the equation. I should also say at the outset here, I'd like to dedicate the class. It's dedicated in loving memory of Miriam Bat Sylvia by Mark Klempner. So may this class be in her honor, and all classes, anything people will learn about this, will be in honor of the soul of Miriam Bat Sylvia. If anybody's interested in dedicating a future class, you just can go online or contact our office, and we're happy to oblige. So these are some of the questions. Now, as you know, when it comes to all challenges, when it comes to all impediments and predicaments we're in, there's two ways to deal with everything. There's we'll call what's the symptomatic approach, looking at the symptoms and trying to address the symptoms, and there's getting to the cause, to the root issue. In medicine, of course, it's also the same case. Now, sometimes we need the short-term intervention, a Band-Aid, an aspirin, a Tylenol, an Advil. You need to do what's necessary to stop the bleeding, and then sometimes build up the strength before you can perform surgery or do something more serious to get to the root of an issue. But it's one of the parts of being, what does wisdom really require? Wisdom in any given area is to know when it's a symptom thing and when you need to get to the root of it. I spoke about physical medicine. Talk about psychological medicine, it gets more complicated. Like, let's say a person dealing with fears or depression or rage or difficulty with intimacy and commitment and relationships with people. So there's the symptoms, which are easier to identify. You see it either in patterns or long-term habits or resistance to certain things. But getting to the root is far more complicated because you can't really identify it physically. You can't just put it under an X-ray and figure out what's the root of a person's fears or insecurities. So there you need to probe more, if necessary. And here's also a big question: how much should you probe? Do we have to dig up someone's entire past, entire childhood, before to get to the root of everything? And is that even possible to do? So I'm from the pragmatic. My approach is a very pragmatic one when it comes to these things. Like in any situation, you don't perform invasive surgery unless you have no choice. If you can solve something on a behavioral level, which means getting someone to shift their habits and their patterns and routines, or even a little more with emotional or behavioral, emotional, and cognitive conditioning, then it works. Then you don't necessarily have to dig up every skeleton in your closet, which itself can also cause new problems. But things, some things may be best to be forgotten. But if, on the other hand, things continue to haunt you, even when you intervene on a short-term basis or on a symptom level, and clearly there's something more, then you obviously have no choice. So it's all, to me, it's case by case, based on the situation. So I think the same question can be posed when it comes to procrastination. Is procrastination a symptom or a cause? Now, of course, it's a cause for other things, but is procrastination really the root issue in people's lives? Or is it a symptom of something else? And obviously, I want to make the qualification that not all procrastination, that shouldn't all be dumped into one pile. There's a natural procrastination that most people have when it comes to new situations. I don't think every time a person is tentative about, let's say, traveling to a new place or meeting a new person or going to an appointment, you immediately have to attribute it to some type of psychological problem, because it's natural. As a matter of fact, I would find it unnatural if somebody just goes gung-ho into every situation. It's natural for a person to have a certain measure of shyness and bashfulness and so-called hesitation in new situations. So we have to distinguish between that and something far more chronic, where you really are consistently undermining yourself by not showing up on time or not, or pushing off important things. So again, this all has to be done in a lot of gray areas in the spectrum of discussing this topic. So going back to the symptom and root question, That's a tremendous, that's a critical question, and I would suggest that submit that's a critical question regarding any issue psychological. That when you're dealing with something, are you dealing with a symptom or you're dealing with a root? I will say this from my humble, limited experience. Most problems on the psychological realm that people have, and I'm not talking about chronic in the sense where you need medication or you're going, a person with a little mental illness or something of that nature. Usually we deal with symptoms. Most of us don't identify root problems because if we did, we'd already be in good shape. We look at symptoms, and the symptoms accumulate to the point where we need to do something about it. Because by nature, as I mentioned before, by nature we will resist addressing an issue. It's just like the classic joke. It's a chelam joke, but they use it a lot in healing today. Someone's looking for his keys in the middle of the night. And his neighbor comes over and says, let me help you look for the keys. And says, okay, let's retrace the steps. Where did you lose them? And he points like 50 yards away. He says, I lost them there. So he says, why are you looking here? He says, because here's where the light is shining. We look not where the problem is, we look where it's convenient to look. The other joke they tell about these two Jews come to a foot doctor. They're both suffering from sciatic pain in their right leg. And they're both really in agony. And one of them goes in, the other one waits in the waiting room. And he hears the doctor's obviously checking him out, and he hears yelling and screaming. He's getting close to the nerve, so he's really he's exploring and evaluating. So he hears the guy's yelling. Anyway, it's horrendous. Finally, he comes out and he's sweating and all that. So now the friend goes in, and the first one that went in was expecting to hear the same yelling and screaming. No, it's quiet, not a peep. And he can't understand what's happening. He has the same problem, same doctor. I'm sure he's checking him out. Why is he so quiet? Was he so disciplined? He doesn't. Anyway, the second guy comes out. He says, I don't understand. He's smiling. And he says, well, I understand. I'm still in pain from the evaluation. He says, I showed the doctor my other leg. He didn't show him the right leg because he didn't want to be in pain. So this is part of the humor involved in denial and avoiding issues. We don't want to hear what the problem is, so we go where the light is shining. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's always ridiculous when we hear it about others. Then when we do it ourselves, it's not so ridiculous. But that's what we are. We're somewhat of a peculiar, you can say, absurd people. We have absurd, bizarre ways of dealing with problems. When it comes to procrastination, it's no different. That we also don't usually look where the root is. We usually look where the symptom is, even if we look at all. I want to talk about this in that context. If you're pushing it off, most likely it's something that is like pulling teeth, going to the dentist, or worse, where you really feel resistance. I mean, I could tell you, I raise money for my organization. Raising money is one of those places where procrastination and raising money, I think, are synonymous. Because no one likes it. I don't like to do it. You have to go to somebody and ask them for something. Was it the fear of rejection, or, why am I asking you? You should be asking me for something. That type of thing, pride. But on the other hand, it's a necessary thing to do, and that's how you build things. And frankly, you find out one day it's not just fundraisers that do it, it's also people who are raising money for investment or capital. They also got to go ask. There maybe they're offering financial gain and profit, and here you're offering spiritual gain and profit. You know the challenge, right, Lionel? Yes. Not easy thing to do. But when you do something that you really enjoy and pleasure, you're first online. I must say there must be chronic procrastinators that probably even enjoyable things they also push off. That's another discussion. Maybe that's part of this discussion. So what is this thing, and why does the Torah make it such an important point to really have that alacrity and do things in that type of way? Wake up in the morning, do it first. So on a basic level, like I just said, because that indicates commitment, it indicates passion, excitement. If you love somebody, you can't wait to see them. If you love something, you can't wait to do it. If you're pushing it off, it means that you don't really love it. Or your fears are stronger than you. So what does that tell you? So clearly, procrastination in this context is definitely a symptom. Because if you loved it, you wouldn't be procrastinating. If you don't, or you're not sure you do, so right there, so maybe the challenge is not why we procrastinate, maybe the question is why can't we fall in love with things that are important for us to do? Even it may be difficult. And again, this doesn't mean we won't at times have that resistance. But the attitude then should be am I passionate, excited about things? Or am I afraid? So can we say that perhaps it's connected to what I mentioned earlier, that there are fears involved? And that those fears in turn paralyze us and numb us from really being excited about things? I know people who really are afraid of becoming excited about anything because they've been disappointed so many times, they don't want to go there. So they take an attitude of almost a neutral, vanilla attitude to everything. Anything happening, not sure, maybe, because they don't want to be hurt. There's no question there's an element of that. I would not suggest that all procrastination comes from that fear, but that clearly indicates but it's clearly one root cause. But then the question just carries over, why are we afraid? What are we afraid of? What, death? Are we afraid of what? Embarrassment? What are we really afraid of? So we'll address that as well. But there have to be other root causes. And as I said, with Abraham and the emphasis on alacrity and the promptness and so on, we can learn deeper reasons for the resistance. So let me go using Kabbalistic terminology, which some of you may be familiar with, but I'll explain it in a way that I think everybody can understand. But I will share what the sources are for this. The sources, as you may have heard from me many times, is I once wrote an article, I think it was, someone said, is the economy stupid? So I wrote an article, it's the tzimtzum stupid. Meaning, what is the real root of all issues? So there's the tzimtzum. Let's talk about this tzimtzum. What is the tzimtzum? So this is a concept, a mystical concept, that was introduced and taught to us by the holy Arizal, Isaac Luria. And Isaac Luria said the following, in explaining the real dichotomy between the divine reality, between a higher reality and our reality, he comes to explain that there's a tremendous paradigm shift from what he called divine consciousness to ego consciousness. So when you think about, let's just talk about a very basic element here. Today modern physics teaches us, and is well known in science, that we live in a symbiotic universe. There's no fragments. Everything is part of one reality. And it's combined by whether it's the theories of string theory or the quilt theory or different theories, but everything is connected. And not connected necessarily to the naked eye, but beneath the surface, there's on the subatomic and quantum level, everything is interconnected. This is basic. And yet, we don't feel it and we don't sense it. Let's talk on a personal level. The Talmud says that we're all like one large organism. The human race is. And meaning we all need each other and we all complement each other. And we all are necessary. And yet you see that humans can easily gravitate to injustice, war, hatred, discrimination, racism, yeah, and all forms of prejudice and so on. But if we are indeed all part of one entity, as the Talmud asks the question, is it conceivable that the right arm should strike the left arm? Is it conceivable that one part of your body should turn on another? We call that autoimmune diseases. It's one of the worst things. So how is it possible that human beings, who all inhabit this earth, and are all interested in finding happiness in their lives, and want their children to grow up in a peaceful, beautiful world, how is it possible that we do indeed have the war and hatred that marks history, perhaps better than today than it's ever been, as the Freedom House and many statistics show? But nevertheless, there's still, you can actually, people murder each other. So somewhere the mystics, and the poets for that matter, and the romantics, everyone wonders, how is that possible? You see that humans have the capacity for love in tremendous ways, for nobility, for kindness. And then we also have the capacity to be the worst, to literally massacre each other. So the mystics, especially Isaac Luria, one of the ways they resolve this is they say there must be some tremendous concealment that doesn't let us sense and see the connection we have with each other. So like no normal human being would put their hand in fire. Why? Because fire is damaging. And we all have an instinct of self-preservation. If you see someone putting their hand in fire, one of two things. Either they're ignorant that it's fire, or they're ignorant to the fact that fire harms you. So ignorance, essentially, a concealment. And he calls it the tzimtzum harishon, this primordial, this initial, this black hole, quantum leap, paradigm shift, where this higher divine consciousness was completely concealed, allowing for the presence of independent consciousness like ourselves to emerge. And a byproduct of that is that we're able to hurt each other because we don't see ourselves as part of one. And with the purpose of existence being exactly that, to see through this shroud, to see through this darkness, through this ignorance, and realize we are indeed part of one symphony, and we each are necessary, and we each need each other to complement one another. Like an orchestra of 7 billion people, each with their own musical note to play, or musical notes, and the harmony comes from the harmony within the diversity. But if you don't know it, so imagine an orchestra that does not know they're part of one big team, what happens? It'll become chaotic, a lot of noise, and when it gets worse, actually battles and wars between them, who will dominate? Because the egos get in the way, and egos clash. Whereas spirituality, as the same Rabbi Shneur Zalman mentions in chapter 32 in his book Tanya, chapter Lev, in Hebrew Lev is heart, and also you can pronounce love, chapter love, that the essence of love is when two people do not let their egos dominate. They don't let their bodies and their physical egos dominate, but they allow their souls to merge. And souls do not have the same type of competition and survival of the fittest that human bodies and the physical world does have. So the essence, therefore, is to see through the shroud, as I said, the concealment, and reconnect. So in an interesting way, the Kabbalists say that the purpose of creation is reconnecting the broken shards, reconnecting the fragments. So think of it like this. When the universe began, it was all like one book, all beautifully organized, a story, one narrative. And then all that narrative was torn. Think of a torn book, and then someone scattered all the pieces of the book all over the world. And it's our job is to gather those pieces together and reconnect them so the story should be told. One analogy given. What does this have to do with procrastination? I'll tell you what it has to do. If indeed the tension between matter and spirit, the tension between different identities lies at the heart of what existence is about, because for us to be independent entities, so there's also a tension going to be between intentions and actions. So you may want to do something, but there's going to be an inertia and a resistance. So I submit this is the formula. And maybe this is the first time it's ever been stated. I'm not saying that to toot my horn, I haven't seen it anywhere. That procrastination, the formula of procrastination is a result of a tension between what you want to get done and getting it done. And that tension is a result of a dichotomy, I would say a dissonance between matter and spirit. And that dissonance is what causes us to resist, to have fear, to procrastinate. When a man like Abraham or someone else feels enthusiasm and excited about what needs to get done, the resistance is gone, and therefore the seamless flow is back. So it is a tzimtzum in a sense that almost slows us down, does not allow us to take an idea, a dream, or an objective and really fulfill it quickly. The resistance is what causes that delay, the procrastination. So procrastination essentially is a form of inertia. That's a result of the tension between a world the way it's supposed to be and the world the way it is. When they say that when Nixon resigned from office, so he was walking out of the Oval Office or wherever it was, but when he was signing the papers, his resignation papers, so he came to that big portrait that's in one of the lobbies of the White House, and one of the halls. It's a portrait of a pensive pose of JFK, who was, of course, loved Camelot, right? Some speculate whether he would still been loved had he stayed alive, but that's another discussion. So he turns to the portrait, and he says to the portrait, he's speaking to the portrait. He says, "They love you because you remind them of who they want to be, and they hate me because I remind them of who they are." So all of us have like two sides to us: who you are and who you want to be. And when there is a dissonance and a dichotomy between them, there's always going to be tensions. I'll phrase it in another way. If you knew, absolutely, without question, God himself came to you and said, this is the purpose of your life, and you knew it's resonating in your heart and soul that this is what you must get done in your lifetime, and broken down not just in your lifetime, but this year, and this month, and this week, and this day, when you woke up in the morning, you knew very clear, through and through, this is what you must get done. Would there be procrastination? There wouldn't be. Unless there's some force that stops you. I'll discuss that in a moment. Why? Because you have total alacrity, you have total clarity, which gives you total alacrity to get it done. I'll use an example. God forbid, if someone's in danger, literal open danger, unless there's something really the matter with them, you will act. Whether it's yourself or a loved one, you get the person straight, rush them to the hospital. Rush. I'm using the word rush intentionally. Why? Because there's life and death at stake. And you understand very clearly that if you don't act quickly, it can be life and death. They say when FDR commanded his forces after Pearl Harbor, the attack on Pearl Harbor, he commanded his chief brass to retaliate and to show the Japanese that we're going to not take this lying down. So they said, it's impossible, President. And the president, who was then already in stilts, what did he have? He had the metal, he had polio, and he had these metal, what do you call them, crutches, and also the support for his legs, right? The braces, exactly. So he literally, without help, and let anyone help him, forced himself to stand up and said, don't tell me this is impossible. To show that type of leadership. There's no impossible. When you're a commander-in-chief, there's no impossible. Soldiers can say it's impossible. Sergeants, colonels, and so on can say it's impossible. Commander-in-chief cannot afford to say it's impossible. So then they came up with some plan, and FDR wanted to know who came up with the plan. They said a submariner. So he said, I love submariners. You know why? Because they're the ones that what do they call it? Not manage, direct I'm losing my words tonight. Well, they direct the submarine. They're captains of the submarine. That's what a submariner is. So he says, I like submariners. You know why? Because they don't have time for BS, and neither do I. Because in a submarine, you're underwater, and you're very vulnerable, because you have no recourse. If one of those bombs hits you, you're over with. You know, a ship, you can jump ship. There's lifeboats underwater. So underwater, there's training and the necessity for alacrity, quick decisions, and you have to make the right decision. There's no room for procrastination. You look at people in the military, actually, that's one of the things you find out. That's the first thing that they attack. There's no room for procrastination. You can't delay. If you get an order, shoot. You get an order, retreat. You get an order, move here, move there. There's no, you know what? I got to think it over. So think about that. What suddenly changes when you're on the war zone, when you're on the front line? What changes is a sense of urgency. What changes is total clarity that something has to get done here. So here's my question. My question to all the theorists out there, historians. Do you think that there's a higher rate of procrastination in the 21st century than there was in the 15th century? The answer is obviously yes. Because we are the age of comfort zone. We're the age of prosperity. We're an age that there's no sense of urgency, you know. I'm preparing now to watch the Super Bowl for the next 6 months. Now, the Super Bowl, as we all know, has no consequences. You know, it's exciting to watch. It's a team against a team. But in a way, it's a blessing of our generation that we don't have bigger challenges than who you're going to root for. The curse of the generation is that this becomes so important that you don't have a sense of what priorities are. When's the last time America had to fight for life and death? I say that as a blessing. So when you don't have that type of focus, you don't have that clarity, well, of course you're going to procrastinate. It's natural. Because why not? Why should I rush? What's there to rush? You tell me something important. If I don't do this and this within a half hour, you don't call that number, you're not going to make $1 million. Fine. That gives me the motivation. So when you think about it, from that perspective, procrastination may be nothing at all about how we're wired. That some are more maybe it comes down to whether we have that sense of urgency driving us. And I go back now to the tzimtzum that I mentioned before. What the tzimtzum does, it creates a distortion of what is real. Where you can convince yourself, as I said, just like we convince yourself that we're fragmented individuals and when we're truly one, you could also convince yourself that who says there are priorities? I've heard from many people, who said there's purpose altogether? You know, if you're going to make an argument that there's no purpose to life, and there's no meaning to life, and there's nothing, which is many people are very invested in that. You know why? Because it gets them off the hook to not feel so bad. You know, if there's no purpose, there's nothing. So who cares if I don't accomplish anything with my life? Well, let's go back to the model, Abraham. Abraham had that total seamless flow. Now, let's look at the human race. Did you ever see a baby that's a procrastinator? Newborns, 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds. When did they start procrastinating? When they learn from adults how to procrastinate. Now, I understand. Someone will say, what do you mean? You tell your baby, your child, let's eat breakfast. They procrastinate. They want chocolate, they want a candy, they want this, they want... Yeah, because they've learned they don't like breakfast and so on. But they're not natural procrastinators, because if they were, they would be procrastinators from the youngest of age, and babies are never procrastinators. There's no baby, you know, they'll, on the contrary, you don't give a baby its needs, they'll make sure to wake you up and get you out of your procrastination. Mothers and fathers lying in the middle of the night, the baby's crying, and they just wait and can't wait till the baby to stop crying. Fine. It's the parents that, and basically the baby's in need, hungry, in pain, needs to be diapered. A baby will never allow a procrastinator in its midst, because it has needs. Now, they may not be life and death, but they're needs. So if you think of it, the natural state of a human being is a pre-tzimtzum reality, where there is no such resistance and inertia. That the world in which we see that has become slowed down, so-called, to the point of, like, you know, I've talked about doing nothing. Some people have mastered the art of becoming couch potatoes. Maybe that's the art of becoming the ultimate procrastinator. And I've told a joke. A guy sitting on a bench, an older guy, and he's very depressed. So his friend comes over, he says, why are you so depressed? He says, my wife is very upset at me today. What's new about that? She's always upset at you. He says, no, today's special. She went to work. She asked me what I'm going to be doing today, and I said nothing. So she said to me, didn't you say that yesterday? That you're going to do nothing? And I told her I wasn't finished. That's when she went ballistic. He wasn't finished doing nothing. I wasn't finished procrastinating. You understand? So it's become an end of its own. Now this is all, if you think about it from the context that I'm describing now, so we have a situation where we can live in a world where who you are and what you do is not aligned with each other. I always point this out. You ask somebody, who are you? What do? They give you their business card. I've tested it many times. And I say, is that who you are or is that what you do? Oh, you're right, that's what I do. I say, but who are you? Oh, I don't have a business card for that. That's a bigger discussion. And some people will say, I don't even know who I am. I know what I do. I don't know who I am. Do you like what you do? Not necessarily. So at least you know that what you do is not who you are because you don't even like it. And we know that today most people don't like their jobs. Or some learn to like it because they got no choice. The rare individual, the rare specimen that says, I love my work, I love what I do. I mean, that's a gift. So we see around us, Karl, not Groucho, made it clear in his scathing analysis, a scathing critique of capitalism, the concept of alienation, the alienation of the worker from the product, the alienation from one worker to another worker, the alienation of the worker to the boss, the alienation on many, many levels. Now, I'm not a Marxist, so don't think I'm quoting Marx to make any capitalistic economic statements here. But some of his critiques are very accurate. You see it. Once upon a time, a farmer worked on his land, so you ate the potatoes that you toiled to harvest. You ate the rice, the extra you traded. You were holistically and naturally connected to your handiwork. Industrialization changed that dramatically and can, yes, depersonalize. That's why business is so depersonalized. And many people feel they lose their soul in business. And many people feel it causes them to lose their friends because it becomes so competitive. And not because you're fighting for your soul, you're fighting for advantage. You're fighting for who's going to be higher on the corporate ladder. And many companies actually play people against each other in this context. So there's a lot to criticize. You can say what Churchill said, that capitalism may be the worst system, but he's never found a better one. Or he said about democracy. Fine. And I'm not here to criticize capitalism. I'm just pointing out that modern society has its depersonalization challenges. I hear about the social media, which is essentially supposed to be a social connection. The people behind social media, most of them are very antisocial people. And they created a whole system, a whole network of friends you never have to meet. How do you like that? Do you imagine that? Having a social connection to someone you never met in your life. Now, again, I use technology, and I'm proud of using technology, but technology, let's be honest, is neutral. Junk in, junk out. Technology could also be a tremendous force of alienation and disconnection. With all its connection, it could also become something that's a wall between us. You know, we can be anonymous. We can do things that would never do in public. You know, there's a whole ugly side, the dirty side to it. Let's not kid ourselves. But there's also a powerful side. So I'm not suggesting technology is bad or good. Technology is neutral. It's like a knife. Use it to cut bread, great. If you use it for the wrong thing, it's destructive. That's simple as that. The point I do want to make is that we could become so desensitized. I mean, look, first time, even today, I see a meeting. Everybody's texting during the meeting. So someone said to me, I said, that's so rude. They said, it's not rude, everyone's doing it. I said, since when is collective rudeness not rude? Just because everybody's doing it. It's like everybody's slapping each other, no problem. But it is rude if you think about it. I'm having a conversation with you. So I understand an emergency. But once upon a time, there was no text, and we dealt with emergencies. And I feel, I mean, I can't say I'm never guilty of it, but I really find it to be a diminishing of dignity between people. I'm having a conversation with you. Why are we doing something else? Not I should, not you should. And say, well, they're waiting for a response. It's become so much that expectations, if you don't respond to a text, people get annoyed and they get offended. What does that tell you? I was driving in a car with someone, and we hadn't seen each other in a while. And I can't get his attention to have a conversation. He's busy texting. So what do you think I did? I texted him. And he looks at me, Like I see he's somewhat disoriented. Like he says, "You texting me?" I said, "Yeah, because I can't get your damn attention." Not that that got his attention either. He laughed, and that was that. We didn't ever. Anyway, I go back to our discussion. So what happens is that we lose our soul in a way. And once there's the dissonance between either who you are and what you do, or between your purpose and mission in life, and the things you're involved in, there's no question there's going to be inertia, there's going to be resistance, because you don't have that seamless flow from within. If you knew in your heart right now, as I said before, what you need to do, there's no room for procrastination. I need to do this. This is an emergency, sense of urgency. And I'm not talking about now emergency life and death. That's just an example. I must do this. And that's why we see suddenly when it comes a deadline, and someone says, this is your last chance, etc., suddenly we get that alacrity. Abraham was great because he didn't need that. He didn't need to hit rock bottom. He had his mind where he had his head in the right place. Something important he knew has to be done right now. And you find this. There's discipline you do find. You do find it in the military. You do find it with certain people who are very focused. And that, a word is a word, a time is a time. And they will do, even if it's uncomfortable, they'll get it done. Now, I am not suggesting we can suddenly go change our entire lives and suddenly become this type of, have this alacrity and have this focus. But it's important to identify the root of it. The root goes back to something that's far beyond procrastination. It goes to the issue, which is what I want to really address, which I am addressing, is your focus in life. Why are you here? I mean, one of the biggest things that we procrastinate about, of course, is we think we're going to live forever. And even people who get older, it's not like, and it's an easy thing to come to. Why? Because naturally we don't feel I'm a step closer to dying, God forbid. It's not like we think today, you turn 50, oh, I'm now like 10 years closer to death or 100 years closer to death, whatever it is. You don't think that way. Because when you're alive, you just feel you're alive. God forbid, when a person is ill, they may think that way. Now, there's an expression that a person should always think that this may be their last day of life. Not in a negative way, but in a sense of focus. Like, what would you do if it was? It's meant to create that type of prioritizing that in turn creates that alacrity, that zrizus that I was talking about before. So zrizus is the Hebrew word for alacrity, which is considered to be an extremely beautiful feature and virtue. It means that when someone asks you to do something, you're going to get it done quickly, promptly. You won't have to remind them again. You won't have to call them again and so on. Now, I said I'm guilty, I don't know about anybody, I'm guilty for this. Sometimes I'm swamped, I'm spread thin. I have all my excuses. I don't know if they're really legitimate or not. Because, when something like really vital, you get it done. And sometimes, some of us who are also pleasers tend to overcommit to people. And then later we have to find excuses because we can't get it all done. That's another, because we want to please. But what exactly is pleasing? This brings me back to the question of fear. Why we're afraid. What are we afraid of? So a child who's been criticized a lot, if we've been disappointed, if promises have been broken, so yes, we have a lot to fear. We fear because we grew up with fear. And that fear is not a rational fear. It's there. But that fear is also rooted in the tzimtzum harishan. It's also rooted in that tzimtzum. It's rooted in a place that's not real. Because if you think logically, and I've spoken to people who live with a lot of fear, I said, on paper, can you tell me any legitimate reason? When a push comes to shove, they will say there's no necessarily legitimate reason, but I'm still afraid. That's what makes it so difficult. It's one thing someone's pursuing you with a gun, God forbid, or there's something very real enemy out to get you. Okay, so that's an objective concern, and then you address it. But when there's no smoking gun like that, when there's nothing pursuing you per se, and it's not like if I did this is going to happen. If I was warned, your boss tells you do A, B, C, again, you're fired. Okay, so you could be fair of being fired, so But if you don't have any of these tangible so-called enemies, so where's it coming from? It's coming from a delusion inside of you that you are either going to be judged, or you are inadequate, or you're not worthy, and therefore you're just afraid. It's just a state of fear. That fear is absolutely no basis, especially when you understand the underlying unity. But God sent you to this earth. He gave you a soul, gave you a mission. If He didn't want you here, He would take you. He hasn't taken you. So I remember I once told this to somebody. He says, well, that's what I'm afraid of. He may take me any minute. So he said, the rest of your life you're going to be busy, worried they may take you. But meanwhile, you're here. Why don't you think about the fact that He's a vote of confidence in you? No, I'm afraid the moment later. What my good friend Philip always says, you know, my soul came down to worry. I'm worried. I'm worried about being fired, though I wasn't even hired. So some people worry about being fired. They're not even hired. Some people worry about the story. The story's not over. The story didn't even begin. So we're dealing here with a situation where there is this concealment, this fundamental tzimtzum, quantum paradigm shift concealment, where you look at the world, you see a world, and you don't really realize what's going on beneath the surface. You look at yourself in the mirror, and you don't realize you have a vote of confidence from the greatest reality of them all, God Himself, that says, I want you here. You have a mission. So how does one deal with this? To just go fight City Hall, go fight your fears is very difficult. There's no weapon that fights fear, just like there's no weapon that can fight darkness. How do you fight darkness? You dispel it with light. So this discussion is not just an academic one to find the cosmic root of procrastination. There's a solution. You need to bring light into your life. You need to bring things that are compelling. If I see someone procrastinating, I wouldn't say to him, okay, let's figure out a schedule, a deadline, and so on. You know why? Because they're going to figure out a way around it. You know, procrastinators don't like calendars. They'll find a way that the calendar got misplaced, or I wrote it so small I can't read it. Trust me, I know these tricks. I do it myself. Sometimes I write a calendar so small, and you don't even know, why am I writing it small? I think I'm saving paper or something. Then I realize it's almost like I don't want to be in front of my face that I didn't get it done. So I have an excuse. I didn't see it and so on. It's embarrassing to admit, but I've done this. I try not to. And I like when I come sometimes to an office, they have like on a whiteboard or something, the big goals, they're there. There's nowhere to run. And then you see somebody's like wrote it like under a footnote, and you realize right away they're avoiding it. You know, that's one of my signs. So you can work with a calendar, you can work with deadlines. That's the problem. The person is not capable of that. The way to go is completely different direction. Let's find a project that you really like. Let's make it compelling. Let's make it urgent. And work on that. Because if you bring the light in, what you're doing is you're weakening the tzimtzum dissonance. The tzimtzum, what I called it before, tension between matter and spirit, between who you are, what you want. Do something that works for you. And try to do it in a sense, an urgent way. Connect with other people. You know, I know for myself, writing Toward a Meaningful Life or other works, I have deadlines. I'm working with someone. They're waiting for my manuscript. And that final manuscript has to be at the table, desk somewhere. It's not just the deadline part. It's that you're involved with other people. And it's not just disappointing. It's just you feel the excitement about it. And everybody gives each other strength. So you look for things that are in your life that you could find something that you don't procrastinate about. And guarantee that will spill over and have ultimately a weakening other procrastination in your life. So it's not a direct approach of going, let's attack it, or let's sit with a therapist, or get a coach. Somewhere it's going to give because you just haven't really changed. But if you find something that you are excited about, that you initiate, that's your baby. Your baby, yeah, your baby. And if you don't do it, no one's going to do it, but you're excited about it, guaranteed you'll have more motivation. Now, it takes not just you're excited about it. It takes getting a team, getting others involved. And it's not also a 100% guarantee. Any procrastinator could always stop procrastinating about anything. But that's a far easier way to work because what you're doing is you're attacking the root. You're not attacking the symptom. You're not attacking the situation that the person's procrastinating about. You're going roundabout way, under the radar, over the radar, whatever you want to call it. You're going into a scenario where you find that excitement. I see that works again and again. I had a woman, she brought her son to see me. Very talented guy, very smart. He was 18, 19 years old, 20 years old. Wouldn't get out of his bedroom. He was depressed. You know, I don't know what he was doing with his smartphones and this. But he's very, I see it, very talented guy that was just, he got into this, in a funk here. And obviously these things can get worse because if they don't get better, you don't want it to become suddenly your life. So it's very difficult. First he didn't want to talk, and then he did talk. But then something happened, because I had on a piano near where I was, a guitar. It wasn't even an actual guitar. It wasn't a real guitar. It was one of these small models made out of like a piece of art. But it was like the shape of a guitar. Another one was the shape of a not a clarinet, saxophone. Yeah, sorry, saxophone. So there's two images, and I see he's like intrigued. He's looking at it. And I said, "You like music?" He says, "Yeah, I love music." So I had my button, so to speak. I said, "You play any music?" He says, Nah, I'm so dull, blah, 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 So what I did was I made a few calls, because I know a lot of musicians. And I said, "There's a young guy. Maybe you could slap him along on one of your road trips, or wherever you're preparing, doing a record, or you're doing an album, or you're just going out. It's a jam. And he'll help out, help out." I said, "Would you like to do that?" He says, "Yeah, I'd love to do that." And it wasn't nothing genius about it, to be honest. It was just finding something. Instead of fighting, I could have sat with him and spoken for 50 hours, 1,000 hours, or 1,000,000 hours. Why are you depressed, and why this, and why that, and your mother, and your father, and where's your father, and where's this one? There's plenty of stuff that clearly was obviously a problem. He was having issue with his mother. His father, I think, was completely out to lunch, and then later his father died from overdose, whatever. It was a mess. So I could have taken that approach, but I decided, you know what, let's find something. Now, it's not like his life is solved, but he loves it. And he got to know them, and he's carrying this, and now he's helping jam. He plays, and he's learning from them. It's like an incubator type of thing. It was a perfect lesson. Now, it's not purely a procrastination discussion, but in this case, he was just sitting around doing nothing. You have to find the thing that everybody has a soft spot. Let's put it this way. Everybody. I've never met someone that doesn't have a soft spot. It may be hard to find. They may be very hurt. They don't want to go out and so on. Obviously, it comes to procrastination. I hear a lot about dating. They find people complain, "I have no one to date." They finally have a suggested date, starts the procrastination, which is pretty obvious why, because they don't want to be rejected. They've had enough disappointments. They don't want to put themselves on the line. There, it's a little more complicated, because there, if you don't attack it head on, what are you going to do? You got to try to. You can't start working on hobbies and things, and by the time that date is not going to wait around for you. So yes, the first step obviously is a long-term preemptive measures. Get right now. Don't wait till the last minute. Get yourself involved in things that you're excited about. So just starting to lubricate, so to speak, the non-procrastination, the alacrity. I guess I should say instruments inside of you. If you can just lubricate them, get them going, so at least you have under your belt, you can say, "I have some things I'm proud of." Remember, one of the most demoralizing things is when you start seeing yourself procrastinating or other things and just realizing, I don't get anything done. You start looking and saying, "I haven't gotten anything done in 5 years." Here a piece there. So it's critical to have some success stories. Because it's just good, at the end of the day, you come home, you feel, "I've accomplished something today." Maybe small, but you've accomplished. You don't run a marathon of 25 miles overnight. Run a half a mile, run a quarter mile. Doesn't matter. Run 100 feet. But you did it. You made a goal and you did it. That is it's not about quantity, it's about quality. That sense of success, as I said, success breeds success. Failure breeds failure. Because it's so much psychological. It's so psychological. It's not necessarily the success, it's your attitude. If your attitude is, "I'm a procrastinator, I'm lazy, this, tomorrow, next day," you've been doing it for years, that's the worst attitude, because there's nothing's going to work. So find something from left field. It doesn't matter. Find something and someone that you could do something with that you find a little passion. This guy, going back to that 19-year-old, he's now 22, maybe even older, 23, and he has a certain pride. He's lost his sense of complete failure. I'm a failure, which would have just led to more and more failure, obviously. So he has that music. He's gone to school. He's got his challenges. He has a lot of issues that he has to deal with, independent of all of this, but he has something going for him. So I go back to this tzimtzum of that. The reason I went back all the way to the root of it all is because at the end of the day, it's an inertia. Today they're looking for the superconductivity, superconductivity, which is like when you conduct electricity or any flow of energy. So the fact that it has to go through wires or has to go through some type of medium, there's always some resistance. Actually, the whole computing industry is based on this. Why with computers today, in a handheld smartphone today, you have more power than computers that took entire city blocks in the 50s or 60s. What was it? Because you needed more size mattered. You needed more material space, more material. What's the word I want to use? Material physical space, in order to generate so much power. What they've learned to do is to lower the resistance of the material, so a lot more of energy can flow through it. Which is why you'll see one of the big challenges, if you remember overheated computers and all that, the fans. The fan didn't work, the whole computer would go, because it's generating so much heat in that concentrated space. So even wires, the wires that exist today, I know we have wireless, but wireless is also based on certain mediums. There's just different types. So the superconductivities, can you generate electricity without even one iota of resistance? So we know copper wires conduct a lot better than, let's say, silver or gold, but still has resistance. So finding that superconductivity where you're able to actually, let's say a train on rails, there's some resistance. The day they will have superconductive trains, there'll be no resistance, so you'll be able to have speeds that are unimaginable. Today it's not possible, because at the end of the day the wheel hits the rail, there's going to be some tension, and it has to resolve the heat, the sparks, what are other things that happen. This is the tension between matter and energy. Science is looking for the place where matter and energy will become so seamless, where the matter will not be a resistance to energy. In Kabbalistic cosmic terms, the existence, but pre-tzimtzum reality was seamless. There was only energy. But the tzimtzum reality created the dichotomy of matter and energy. What it means in our world, the dichotomy between who you are and what you do, between your soul and your body. Or think of it this way, between a machine and its purpose. Imagine you bring home a sophisticated, complex machine at home, you lose the operator's manual, you have no idea what to do with this machine. So you have a machine, it's a powerful machine, but you don't know how to use it. This is often what happens to us in life. Life itself is a machine, and we lose course. What is it? What is your purpose? What's your mission statement? So when you and your mission are unaligned, that's a product of the tzimtzum, and inevitably there will be many of the vices, including procrastination, as a result. When a person has that type of seamless flow between who I am and what I do, everything changes. Then who you are dictates what you do, and there's no procrastination. If you don't know who you are, obviously you're going to delay. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this, maybe I should be doing that, maybe we'll wait, maybe we won't wait. Abraham, Moses, the great men and women in history that had that connection, they were plugged in, did not have that resistance. So my friends, procrastination is a byproduct, or maybe just a product of this great tzimtzum, this great concealment. In our personal lives, it's the concealment between your soul and who you are. Our soul is rich and with treasures, with power, with potential. It is enthusiastic. It wants to change the world. But we have a body to deal with, and the body says, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I have these needs, I have those needs, I have my sexual needs, and all those things basically shut the soul down. So it's enthusiasm that was there when we were young children. That's why I said children don't procrastinate. That enthusiasm, that excitement, let's take things on, disappears. And that's where, talk about disappearing. This screen keeps disappearing. Okay, fine, what can I do? Anyway, let me just... not sure why this is happening. This machine is behaving very procrastinated way today. I like that. Telling me? Okay. Just give me a minute. Okay. Okay. So, where was I? The resistance. Yeah, the tzimtzum, the disconnect. Yeah. So the disconnect. So when you have your soul, children have that naturally in them, that enthusiasm, because the soul is flowing. And if there was no one to stop them, basically their bodies would be vehicles. So what's procrastination? Is a vehicle suddenly telling the soul, we're not ready to go. I'm tired. The soul is the captain of the ship. It should be telling, it's the submariner. It should be telling the body, the vehicle, this is where we're going right now. We're going because this is what we need to do. Suddenly your physical life, your physical needs, all the excuses take over. What is that? That's like the tool, the instrument, the hammer telling the hand where it wants to go. The hammer shouldn't be telling the hand where it wants to go. The hand should be telling the hammer where it wants to go. And this is the part of that same dichotomy. So procrastination is part of reality. Everybody has elements of it. It's part of the outgrowth of this tzimtzum, of this dichotomy, this dissonance. And we challenge it, we battle it by focusing things that work, you're excited about. Things that really get you. I'm not saying it's going to work every day, but at least you have something, a fighting chance, because you have something that you could really believe in. And that weakens the tzimtzum. That weakens it at its root. And when the root is weakened, automatically the procrastination will go down. So we need to develop, obviously, procedures and methodologies, but this is the gist of it. So there you have the mystical cosmic case for roots of the procrastination and what we can do about it. With that, with full alacrity, I say that Meaningful Life continues this weekly journey, and we so excited to be always part of everybody's intersecting with other people's soul journey and trying to create that soul. So to me, soul and zrizus comes hand in hand. When you're connected to your soul, you always have alacrity. When you're not, you always don't. So you could almost use it as a litmus test, that if you're feeling that slothful, is that the word? And you're feeling way down, it's a sign that your soul is not in control. When the soul is in control, it has clarity, drive. It's like the commander-in-chief. This is what we're going to do. So find those things that work. And there's no doubt that will spill over, as I said. So with that, I bid everyone a very week of alacrity, a week of enthusiasm, a week of, what would we say, promptness, even more than promptness, excitement. And please stay in touch with us, meaningfullife.com, full of resources. If you haven't left us your email address, please just send your email address. We send out a weekly email. Lately, we began a daily soul workout. Have you seen that? Yeah, we started sending out a daily soul workout. And you get the emails at all? I'll get your email address. Okay. But everyone out there, please do so. And until next week, everyone have a very pleasant week and beautiful life. Thank you very much. This was just a mess.
Who you are, they can't answer you.
Well, it's harder.
But why are you saying if you know who you are, what you do, you connect them?
You're an accountant. Is that who you are?
What?
You're an accountant. Is that who you are?
That's what I do.
Right.
Yeah, but when you said